Well, now it's time to do the white balance with this camcorder, the JVC GC PX100, and in this video we're going to go over the quick steps to do it manually. Typically, if you're shooting in the intelligent auto mode, which I've got the camera set to right now, it's that iAuto with the little white highlight over it, pointed right down here to the little sort of white stripe there. When you're shooting in that mode, it does a pretty good job. It's pretty fast and responsive of changing to your light conditions, and it does a pretty good auto white balance on its own. But sometimes you really want to do it manually and customize it for the specific lights you've set for an interview. If you know you're going to be in the location for a while, I recommend just switching to one of the manual settings and customizing your white balance. So in order to do that, let's just flip the dial around. We'll go to full manual, and that's just simply the letter M, and I just line it up with that little line down there. Now I'm in manual mode, and then I can simply go back to my LCD monitor and check my settings. And in order to do that, again, I just want to gently make sure the monitor sort of slid forward a little bit so it's away from that old electronic viewfinder. And let's just flip open the doors here on the hood and get a closer look at this. Okay, we're looking at the LCD and all our indicators would be up on the screen. Notice we have a lot more choices now. We have a shutter speed setting of 1/60th of a second. We have an f-stop that's talking about our exposure or our aperture setting. So these are all things I could now go in and adjust manually. Let's just look quickly at the white balance. In order to get there, I do have to push the menu and go into that touch screen menu once again. So they kind of bury a lot of these features deep inside the camcorder, assuming that most people using this are consumers, not professionals, and they just want to do a auto balance. But I suggest that whenever possible, you do it manually. So I push the record settings, and notice I've got a bunch of choices, and there's white balance right up front. Let's just push that in, and we'll get into the white balance menu. Now notice what it's highlighted right now is that sort of looks like two triangles with a square above it, and it's highlighted in yellow, so it's already set on the manual option. There's A for just a full auto balance. That sunshine icon is for a preset value. It sort of estimates daylight color balance, a cloudy sky day. Then you can also go through a few custom balances, a warmer or a cooler type of light. All your lights, again, as we've talked about, give off different colors. So the best way to get it just right is to just simply do it manually. And I'm already there. So if I were to push through these menus, notice how it changes the color even as I push through. I'm pushing these arrows on the side. That just goes through the different presets. So let's go back to the beginning, and we'll go back to our little manual symbol. And notice what I've got up on the wall. It's just simply a white envelope. So I'm going to adjust the camcorder so that I zoom in all the way, fill the screen with as much white as possible, focus the shot there, get it as good a focus as I can. And now I simply have to push the button that says set. So it's going to go in manually and read all that, and it's going to set my balance. Takes a second, adjust the color just a little bit. Now let's pull out. Okay, now we have a manual white balance. My blue wall looks blue, and my white envelope does look pretty good. So that's how we would do it with the manual settings, is through the menu, make sure you're in a manual shooting mode, and then you can get into the menu and do it that way. Now we're going to look at the steps to do a manual exposure setting, or just to look at our brightness levels and at least give ourselves a good indication of whether we've got the shot properly exposed or not. Again, I'm doing this very simply where I've just got the camera pointed at a wall. I've got a white envelope tape there that I've just done a balance on for color. Now I want to check my brightness and contrast. Notice that when I'm in manual mode, I see these little lines. You zoom in there a little bit tighter, and you see those lines look like zebra lines on the envelope and the bright parts of the screen. Those are a little feature that you can turn on or off through the menu. I'll go back to the menu record setting. If you're in the manual shooting mode, again, learn how to do this manually. That way you really customize the shot, get exactly the right exposure and white balance that you need. And it's what you'd want to do as a professional with a much more sophisticated camera. So we just did balance. Here's the zebra feature. I'll punch that up, and I can turn it off so that I don't see these zebra lines. Or I can put it at 70 to 80%. So what that's going to tell me is that whenever I see those lines on the screen, that part of the shot, meaning the top of the envelope and sort of in along the crease there, in between the blocks on the wall, it looks almost like crawling ants too, or zebra stripes. Those spots on the screen are exposed to 70 to 80% brightness. There's this whole brightness scale from 0 being totally in the black, 100 being like totally bleached out, pure white. So between 0 and 100 we have this scale, and we want to typically see these zebras at between 70 and 80%. The reason we do that is when we expose a person's skin, we're shooting a face for an interview, and they're seated in the chair, and we've got them framed up nicely. I want to see just a little bit of these zebra lines on the bright part of their face. If the light is hitting their cheek or on the forehead or the tip of the nose, and I've got that brightest spot, if I see a little bit of zebra right in that area, assume this was a person's face, then I would have a pretty well exposed shot. So the zebra features, it doesn't show up on the recorded video, it's just in the monitor for reference, just to use to evaluate. But turn that feature on when you're in a manual shooting mode and look at your subject, whether it's an object, a physical object, or a person, and make sure you've got a little bit of zebra on the bright part. And in that 70 to 80% range, that's a good area to have the exposure. Notice also I can go through my settings here. I've got a shutter speed setting right up there, and I can toggle this there's a little exposure button on the front of the camcorder. When I punch it in, it toggles back and forth from shutter speed down to f-stop. Now shutter speed, I don't want to mess with that too much. Let's leave that at 1/60th of a hundred, or 1/60th of a second, excuse me. And that's going to be good for video. I don't really need to change it. If I go too low on that or too slow, I'll get real stuttery effects in the video and it's not going to look good. So I'll leave that there and I'll push the exposure button. I'll toggle down to my f-stop. This is going to allow me to adjust my brightness. So if I notice that my zebra lines are just filling up the person's face, they're totally overexposed, almost too high or too bright on that scale, I can go in and punch that and then turn the little thumb wheel and I can start to darken the shot. Notice how my zebra lines have really disappeared. Let's boost it back up. See, we have about a third of the envelope covered in zebras now, and we're at f1.2. That's a small number, a low number, so it means the iris is wide open. It's as open as I can get it right now in this setting. And if I go to a higher number, turning the wheel, I close the iris. A higher number means I'm letting less light come into the camera lens. So at f5.6, I've almost reduced the zebras. So that's a way you can kind of tweak it. If you need to adjust, look at the person's face. Let's just assume that envelope is a person's face. And I want to maybe get the zebra lines to just about, of course this is a pure white envelope. Not many people are going to have skin this exact color. So skin tones vary and fluctuate. You got a wide variety of complexions and skin colors. So keep that in mind. On a darker complected skin, you're not going to see as many zebras. On somebody with fairer skin, you'll see a little bit more. But tweak it to where you just have the tiniest bit. I'll go to about, I think in this condition, if I had a person sitting right there, I'd go to about in the 3s, 3.2, 2.8, somewhere in there would probably be about right. And I'd have just the right exposure, a little bit of zebra line on their face. And that's just simply by pushing the exposure button, toggling away from shutter down to the f-stop, and then do your adjustments there.